No, but it's different times. Big, so that actually works. Okay, I'll go this one.
Yes, but it's a bit long.
Oh, that's fine. I don't like very cold water. No, it's fine. Thank you. open source and I was so against things that was asking this supporting customers or anybody who's now this kind of just so I think I hope that we will still see this belief that and if that was my open source, or because open source will people has been so stretched now. Even you say next version is closed source and people fish and people will say solution. Yes, at that time during the future of maybe 1.5 2 years. And anything else will be closed source and Sorry, folks, yeah, still getting it from our man at the other side, just, and checked.
We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Yes. Yeah. So okay. Yeah. That's so. Let's wait one more minute. So and then. Yeah. Yeah. Let's start. Okay, lovely people. I am giving a talk today that isn't very technical. It is about keeping a website alive for a very long time and what you have to do achieve that, but also what it gains you. It does give you some pain, but it also gives you some gain. First, I'm going to ask a very quick question. Does anybody recognize this picture? Probably not. It's actually a complaint tablet from 1750 BC to a certain Mr. Ia Nazir, who had sold unfit copper to a person. So basically, this is the very first one-star review in history. So you can see longevity and trust building is a thing that's over 3,000 years old, and a scathing review can ruin your business. For those people who don't know me, I would describe myself as a social activist. I have been active within Plone since 2004. I have been on the Plone Foundation board from 2011 till 2024. I am very happily just retired, withdrawing, recovering, I would say. I'm not a developer. I'm also not a designer, although I dabble sometimes in things. I am definitely a sysadmin and a site admin, and I have a particular affinity with accessibility and with documentation. In my daytime job, I work for something called the Clean Clothes Campaign. The Clean Clothes Campaign works in the fashion industry and the sportswear industry. This is some of our propaganda or public outreach material. So basically, we're a global network of about 230 organizations. We work in the garment and sportswear industry, and we really focus on working conditions. We also do take account of the environmental costs of fashion, but the worker rights are our main focus. And this organization started in 1989. Yes, we will have a 35-year thingy upcoming year. And we are a very big user of open source. You might not expect that from an NGO, but we are. Why? Well, first, because it really aligns with the values that we have ourselves as a nonprofit, as a democratic, as a progressive network. The open source ideals match one-on-one with what we want in general with the world, but also it allows us to work in a secure manner. And why is that important? Well, to us, security is not exactly a luxury. You may or may not know this, but the majority of garments are made in countries where the rights of citizens are not exactly guaranteed. Um, and it is a very exploitative industry. And if you go fight against that, you make enemies. So we have many companies and also many countries that definitely do not like us, to put it mildly. Yeah, we work in places like Myanmar, places like Vietnam, places like Bangladesh, but also Honduras, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. It's sometimes quite challenging. So security to us is quite important. So as example, all our laptops are fully encrypted. They run Ubuntu, well, Pop OS, which is like a derivative, which is slightly friendlier. We host all our servers ourselves using Proxmox, and we keep all our infrastructure in-house, because if somebody wants to subpoena us, I would rather they go through me than through a cloud provider, because I can choose to go to jail over it, whereas the cloud provider will just give it. So we run Plone, several Plone sites. We use Quave for our internet, which is super important to us because it had basically kept us alive during the pandemic. But we also run a lot of other infrastructure like Nextcloud, like Big Blue Button, which is like a self-hosted Zoom. We use Civi CRM and yeah, lots of other services. So now I'm going to take you back a little bit in time, around the time when dinosaurs roamed the earth and we all had to defend ourselves from dinosaurs. As everybody knows, this is not fake news, this actually happened. No, our website has been around for a while. We lost the very early incarnations of our website, unfortunately. Pro tip, 3.5-inch diskettes are not a safe medium to back up your site for 20 odd years, especially not if you have an instance where there's water coming from your upstairs neighbors. 3.5-inch floppies and water are not a good combination. But we do have old news. Our news goes back to 2006. And even before that, this was the first action where I actually joined the Clean Clothes campaign as a volunteer. We talked about democracy a lot during this conference. If you spot the building in the background, it's kind of a symbol for democracy. We went to the Olympics in Athens in 2004 to campaign. And we still have that info still also on our website. So some major events that shaped our history. We managed, after we did that campaign in Olympics 2004 and then 2008, we managed to get a historic agreement in Indonesia with sportswear brands and the trade unions, and that was really a major victory. So yeah, sometimes things take a while to get results, but they do get there. Now I'm going to go further in history, going back to today, and probably the worst years in our history. We call them the horrible years. That was the Tazreen fire in Bangladesh, November 24th, 2012. 112 workers died in the factory because the emergency exits were closed. And it took us 3 years of campaigning, hard campaigning. But in the end, we did secure compensation for the families. That same year, 2012, Pakistan, Ali Enterprises fire, 250 people died. Again, all exits closed. Many injured. And this time it took us over 6 years of campaigning to finally get compensation for the victims. So yeah, tenacity, longevity is needed in our case. And probably the darkest day in our history, the Rana Plaza disaster, April 24th, 2013. A day I will never forget. 1,134 people died when the building came crashing down. Another 2,500 were life-threateningly injured, life-changingly injured. It was, yeah, a nightmare. And no amount of money can ever compensate that. Still, it does help. It took us 2 years, but we secured $30 million in compensation for the victims. Again, it does not make anybody alive, but it makes the relatives able to pick up their lives. But more importantly, we were like, we cannot keep doing this. We cannot keep reacting to incidents. We must have like structural solutions. So we campaigned hard for major initiatives. One is the Accord on building fire and building safety in Bangladesh. It was an absolute breakthrough because it was the first legally binding agreement. Over 200 brands signed. It's now called the International Accord because we have extended it to Pakistan. What it means is that brands are legally required to pay for improvements in factory safety. They cannot say like, oh, yeah, we think this is a good idea, but yeah, we're not really paying. It's like, no, you have to pay. So that was really a breakthrough. Not all brands have signed. The next time you go to everybody's favorite cabinet provider, they still haven't signed. We're still campaigning against them. Yeah, some things, some people are really hard to convince. That's why we need long campaigns. Another thing that happened or that came out of that Rana Plaza disaster, all the brands that were involved that produced in that factory said, no, we're not producing there, not our factory, we're not responsible. So we literally had to send people in to go through the rubble and find clothes and their labels to find who was producing there and who should pay. It's probably no wonder that we said never again. We're never again going to do that. So we need to campaign for supply chain transparency. Brands will have to disclose where their stuff is made. So yeah, we started new websites, we campaigned. It spiraled slightly out of control. It was quite a successful campaign. It has now morphed into the Open Supply Hub. I'm a proud board member of the Open Supply Hub. It now covers almost 1 million factories over, well, this data is actually a bit older. It's now 1,500 brands that list where they are producing their stuff. And funnily enough, it's all open source, it's all open data. This is actually a Django app and uses all the Python deduplication names to deduplicate factory names. It's an interesting from a technical standpoint, but also from a social standpoint. So if you've never been to Open Supply Hub, go look it up. It's a really good project. But also, we really campaigned hard on the legislative end. Europe has enacted now a whole slew of corporate responsibility legal frameworks, and the Rana Plaza disaster was really one of the major drivers to get those over the line. Now, you may be wondering, why am I telling this at a web conference? Can't you do something fun? Yeah, I can, a bit later. But it's also important to remember that documenting history matters. The garment industry has a very long and seedy history. Basically, the whole slave trade was born out of the need for cotton. People were enslaved in Africa, brought to the Americans to grow cotton. The cotton was brought to the UK, where the Industrial Revolution started, and the cotton ended up in what was described as the dark satanic mills of Manchester, where children worked very long hours. Dark satanic mills is a quote by William Blake. So documenting history matters. It matters for workers, it matters for lawmakers, for journalists, and it matters for humanity overall. And in an eerie sort of reflection of the fires that we were confronted with, the famous or infamous Triangle Shirtwaist Fire of 1911 in Manhattan, New York, where over 150 women jumped to their deaths as the building got on fire. It was a super deadly incident. And again, it impacted mainly very poor women. Another trait of the fashion industry. So these stories need to be told because not only there are stories of sorrow, but there are also stories of resilience and of resistance. What you see here is the very first trade union in the US. Poor Jewish women organizing to say never again. So it really is important that we remember all these things. I'm proud of these ladies. I consider them our predecessors. And it also shows that, yeah, this industry needs to be held to account. And for that, you need evidence, you need storytelling, and for that, you need websites in these days. So I'll try to lighten the mood a little bit now because, yeah, we're also talking fashion, but yeah, it's also a serious thing. So let's do some fun fashion facts. The global fashion industry is big. Its GDP is sort of like, yeah, South Korea, Spain, talking that kind of size. So it's about, if fashion were a country, it would be the 12th in GDP ranking. It's huge. And at least 75 million people work in it, probably more. We have counted 75 million, but that does not include cotton farmers. So it's probably around 120 million overall. So that makes it also a very powerful industry. Very powerful, very deep pockets. We don't have those, unfortunately. So this is an asymmetric fight. And that means we need all the help we can get. And that's where I get back to some tech stuff. What is our strongest weapon when it comes to websites and to being found on the internet? That is backlinks, really the weapon of choice. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm using a foldable chair as an illustration for a weapon, you should look up the Great Alabama Brawl of 2024. It's fun, the video. It's basically grab whatever is at hand and whack your opponent. Backlinks are really good, especially if they come from good places. So we have a lot of backlinks, links that go to our site from places like the OECD, the United Nations, Wikipedia, but also from academia, school curriculums, books, and especially school curricula and books don't change. So that is why really URL stability is important. School curricula usually at least 10 years in use, books potentially forever. So it's important to keep those links. But also, backlinks are surprisingly effective against algorithm changes. Every time Google changes their algorithm, we end up still on top of the search index. We are not bothered whatsoever. SEO is overrated. Backlinks are really good for you. Of course, not all backlinks isn't the only thing. You also need to get your metadata in order. So yeah, take good care of your metadata. So I still, to this day, do not understand why the site mapping clone is not enabled by default. I always have to tick that box. I'm flabbergasted as to why, because it's so useful. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Create a good robots text is also very useful. I can recommend Google Search Console. I consult it at least weekly to see where people have links to our site that don't exist anymore, or if there's any other problem, if some of my content is referenced by 2 URLs and I haven't designated one as canonical. Really, it is your friend to keep your site in order. And tag early, tag often. Plone does a great job at tagging. Editors not so much, but I've seen some great tools demonstrated here where we could use AI to make sure that at least some semi-useful tags are there. Humans probably can do it better, but sometimes they also don't. So I'd rather then have the AI as a backup. But basically, never change URLs through all your iterations. Even if it feels like Groundhog Day, keep those iterations. And yeah, iterations, we've had a few. as you see, I go wildly through my references. Doctor Who, one of my favorite series. We've been through some. I'll very quickly go through them. This is 1998. Not a very sexy website, but it did a job at the time. The weapon of choice was Notepad, carefully hand-coded. 2003, we switched to Dreamweaver, and as you can see, somebody discovered fonts. I'm really sorry. It was the day when desktop publishing software also became popular, and people were like, I have 100 fonts, I must use all of them in the same document. Those were the days. So 2004, we had sort of gone to a slightly better Dreamweaver theme. By 2006, the organization had kicked out the Windows computers and switched to Linux. So we had to switch to Bluefish, which basically is Dreamweaver. It's sort of like same, but different. 2010, we had Columns. It was a nice website. It was built in Joomla. Hey, it was pretty cool back then. And I didn't start working there. So I started working there in 2010. So you can't blame me for the Joomla. You can blame me, of course, for the 2013, because by then I had made it into a Plone 4 site, which also did its job for a while. But yeah, then again, we switched to something called Castle, which sort of doesn't exist anymore, but for a while it was a opinionated distribution of Plone. It served us quite well, but now it doesn't. So we're switching now, as we speak, to a Plone 6 Voltolite theme-based site. It's still a work in progress because we need to, we've just started the conversion and we need to do work on it, but it's already looking nice. At this point, I would really like to thank KitConcept for all the help that they gave us. We mainly deal with one person, the great Jonas, although every time we have a meeting with him, I get the urge to say, does your mother know that you work at KitConcept? He's very young, he's scarily young, but he's very nice. So yeah, we have to go to the topic of migrations. Migrations is painful, and they are a bit complicated, and you need tools for that. So we get to, the age-old sort of like flowchart for engineers and tools. If it moves and it should not, you use duct tape. If it doesn't move and it should, you use WD-40, all the tools you need. But here, to get stuff out of Dreamweaver and Bluefish, you need wget. From wget, it's not a straight line. That's why the wiggly arrow. You use set and awk to put it into CSV, everybody's favorite data format. My favorite data format, probably not everybody's. Still, it's popular. It's actually everyone's favorite weapon. Who knows what CSV stands for? If you speak it in a German accent, it's really simple. It's namely the comma-separated format. No, it's not. But CSV is widely used. It's very ancient, but it works. As my good friend Pudo made the immortal quote during an event in Berlin, it is the data Kalashnikov. Many wars have been fought with it, and even kids can use it. And that is still through today. Yeah. Oops. Where are we? Yes. So what did we use to get to where we now are? Migrations can be tough, especially from old sites. So from the CSV to get into MySQL for the Joomla site, we just pumped it into MySQL directly, because why not? You can. Then there were several steps to do to get from Joomla to Plone. So first you do the MySQL to CSV dance again. And then I actually wrote a script. Do I need to remind you, I am not a programmer, but I managed to write a script to import it into then Plone 3, Plone 3 never saw the light of day at Clean Close campaign because we switched to 4 before we went there, and the upgrade just worked. It was amazing. It was like, what? I pressed a button and it worked. So good on Plone. Yeah, then we moved to Castle. Castle had its own, what I would refer to as a Frankenmogrifier or transmogrifier, but actually from Transylvania. It was an unrecognizable transmogrifier pipeline, but it sort of worked. But then, yeah, basically we had our Castle site. We used it for 6 years. We never did anything, and even the strongest castle falls with neglect. So 6 years later, no new versions inside, still running on Plone 2 or on Python 2.7. Yeah, you have to do something. So we had to move, we had to first to find a way to get the data out. We managed to graft collective export-import onto this site. It ran into some bugs thanks to two brilliant persons, Philip and Fred. Those bugs were fixed, so now you can actually export directly from Castle. So that's amazing. Lessons learned, stable URLs are awesome. Keep them. Content preservation, cool. Keep doing it. But it's always going to be a little painful. So there's a few things that you just should not do. Because, yeah, it's just going to cause more pain than it's worth. So you shouldn't have the grief. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're fine. What you shouldn't be doing is try to salvage any CSS from your old site. Yeah, it's fine. Honestly, just don't. Throw away all your CSS. Never fight the current CSS framework of the framework that your site is built in. It's just like what you save is maybe the color value. That's about it. But don't try to import or graft old CSS onto a newer system. It just, no, just don't. Do not try to migrate composite pages. Try to salvage the content. Don't ever care for what tiles or portlets or whatever they were called back in the days they were in. Just grab the content and put them all under one another and rearrange them by hand later. Anything else is madness. And also, do not migrate listings because all the underlying content items will have slightly changed their name and the search won't work. We have lots of searching and listings on our website. It's about 200. That's 2 days of work for a concentrated session of listing creating monkeys like me. Spend those 2 days. It's cheaper than hiring developers. Just do it by hand. Honestly, you're fine. What do you do with really stubborn ones? Goats are very stubborn. But also, what do you do with websites that do not provide an export? You use wget. Honestly, it still rules over httrack. You have much more control. Just use it. Learn set, awk, and regex. I recommend everybody to take a course in regex. It's everybody's favorite tool. It's awesome. No, somebody in your organization should learn regex, or you hire somebody who knows regex. One useful tool is Archivebox. You can get it as a Docker container. What it does is makes a complete copy of your website, and it can spit it out as flat HTML. It can spit it out as JSON, but also really nicely, it can spit it out as a WARC, which is a web archive format, which you can directly upload into the Internet Archive. But also, for instance, in our case, we are required by law to deliver our content at certain intervals to the Dutch Royal Library and also to the International Institute for Social History, because they archive things for posterity. And then WARC is the format of choice. It's an open source format that actually is really good at archiving because it's made by archive people who know what they're doing. So Archivebox is really useful. But yeah, data, Nowadays, I still love CSV, but apparently everybody's made a new friend. I don't know why, but we all now must like this JSON guy. Not my type, but yeah, who cares? I actually learned to like JSON for data, but for configuration, I still find it a crime that you can't do comments. In data, I don't need comments, but in configuration file, I'm really like, come on, people. This is, yeah, not very nice, but yeah, that's what it is. So you need to document everything that you do, because you can't document it in a JSON file. You need to document it in a text file or somewhere else. And please publish if they can be generalized, even as a gist or something like that. Some further tips: if you want to manipulate JSON, you can actually. So if you want to manage this guy called JSON, JQ is, of course, the standard for slicing and dicing JSON. If you are of the Python persuasion, Jello does exactly the same, but speaks Python to you. But it is more or less compatible with JQ. SQ is actually very fun. It borrows most of JQ's syntax, but you can then also put it in SQL and our old friend CSV. Very useful tool. Unquery, it's a command line interface for querying your JSON. Really useful. And Emuto is also, it's basically a hybrid of JQ and GraphQL. It's also very nice if you have like a shitload of JSON files and you want to work through it. Yes. So, but I'm calling to normalize import and export because it would make life so much easier. I was preparing before this conference to do a whole risk and benefit analysis of having import-export code in core, but apparently it is there. Nobody knew, but it's there. And yeah, what is slightly missing is that it's not entirely scriptable and cronable as I would like at this moment, because I think that would really help. But there is something called Plone export import or Plone import export. There are both of them, unfortunately, but it's the one in the Plone repository. But now I'm going to call out a certain person, Erico. I will look for you. He wrote it and then didn't document it. So I'm going to go all Liam Neeson on him, and I will look for him. I will find him, and then we'll document it. And I won't give up. Let's go to some future predictions. Future predictions are always great with the benefit of hindsight. This is from the 1930s, and it's, I would say, remarkably accurate. Although I still don't have my bloody flying car in the background parked. Nobody has ever delivered on the flying car thing. But yeah, the phone with the Zoom call on it, yeah, or the FaceTime, yeah, pretty accurate. So in the future, in my future, people will be able to do Plone exporter and then export parts of a site by specifying a regex, saying like all file paths that align with this regex, I would like to export them. The rest you can forget. And I would, of course, also like to import them. And there I would like to have some flags. And the flags could be overwrite the content if there's already content in that place, or append the content, or maybe even do a diff. Let's go crazy. Let's think about some things where that could be useful. Do I have use cases for that? Yes, I have use cases. If all of them were fulfilled, unicorns would poop in your garden and the world would be great. So one of them would be to switch backends. Not every 5 years, but every week, just because I feel like it, or to test them out. So I could switch from ZODB to RHEL storage to NIC, or to some future quantum-based database that has yet to be invented. And I could compare them. I could run one instance on my laptop, of my actual production site and do things to it. And then, yeah, it would be great. Another use case is the age-old, we have just switched enemies. Site-wide search and replace. It will be a replacement for collective search and replace, that dearly beloved by sysadmins tool of the past, where you could literally go through your entire site and replace East Asia with Eurasia, in case you need that. So you download it, you change it in all the JSON files, and you upload again. Done. Another use case would be Sneakernet. Sneakernet is useful in a variety of cases. Difficult countries. We smuggle USB sticks into Myanmar because it doesn't have internet connectivity. But we do want to have that site hosted within Myanmar. But to get over the border, we need a USB stick. Air-gapped places that have high security requirements. But also places with no internet, such as an airplane. Could be very useful. And ideally, you could work on a website while on your 12-hour flight, and then be able to merge what you have done with the production website. Another use case is the backup. How many people, I'm going to go slightly over, but yeah, it's going to be fine. How many people of you back up your site? How many of you restore regularly that backup to see if it works? Huh, not bad. I know a lot of people who don't. So backups that actually get restored are the only backups that are actually valuable and are real backups. But if you use them, for instance, to create a sandbox copy on your laptop, you're actually using them. So you're actually in that process checking if your backup still is valid. Okay, we're coming to the end of the talk. I'm going to be 2 minutes over, but we're going to make the lightning talks. So yeah, we're approaching the recap. So what have I been trying to say? Keeping your content and your URL stability really is a superpower. It really helps in finding your site and keeping it super high in the Google index and other search indexes. It really is important. Plone does an amazing job at it. If you move content about, it automatically marks the old place so that that old place also still works, but it really is invaluable, and tell your customers that it is invaluable, because it's really helpful. What I think is that assuming that import and export and migration are rare is just a wrong assumption. We should step away from that. There are so many benefits between standardized export-import, of course, not from really old versions to current, but between current versions. There might be like one minor version of like 6.0.12 to 6.0.13. Yeah, should probably work. But yeah, quick import and export would be really helpful, because yeah, the problem is partly our planning. Migrations are seen as a singularity. You get a website, you never think of it again, and then 5 years later, oh, panic attack, we need to move. Whereas, yeah, so set it and forget it is rarely useful. Well, it's useful for many things, but not for websites. So basically what I'm pleading for is that import and export and minor migrations should be seen as maintenance. And that way you can get into an endless cycle of renewal, where you are never that far behind. You're always up with the Joneses. You are maybe one version behind the very latest to see if everybody else's website crashes, but you're not like 3 years behind the newest technologies and toys. So you could go onwards, onwards, onwards to infinity, to eternity and beyond. Who gets that reference? No, nobody's seen Toy Story. You, of course. Yeah, to infinity and beyond. Okay, but there is more. Finishing, sorry. of course, the question of money does come up. So who's going to pay to do these minor upgrades? Well, large migrations once every 5 years are actually really costly. Just because you ignore them for a long time, the costs go up and up and up when you do have to do them. So the cost of not migration is even higher because your site will get hacked, you lose your reputation, people will write very long stone tablets about your performance, which will be found 3,000 years in the future. You don't want that. So let's say about yearly smaller upgrades using export of import are actually much cheaper, and they should be budgetable. So everybody should be doing their part. Part of it is on the developer side to create this sort of seamless export and import and easier migrations using that. But, and I say this as the client from hell, clients should also do their part. Clients should budget this as a yearly maintenance. And actually, it's easier to budget something yearly than to have like a giant expense every 5 years. That's how budgeting works. So if you budget it as maintenance and not as migration, you're doing your part as your client. And my pro tip, every work that you have done to customize your site, review if you actually still need it. My experiences is if you create a site, people go wild on customizations. Half of them are never used and can be dropped after a year. So, who wants to live forever, as Freddie Mercury famously sang? We all want to. So think about the longevity even for your project websites, because it will only be online for a year. Famous last words. For project websites, actually freezing into static is totally appropriate. So yeah, this is more or less the end of the talk. As you may have seen, I have used a lot of mixed metaphors in my images, but yeah, that's just what happens. I learn from the best. Sorry, not sorry. So in that spirit, I say, may the odds be ever in your favor. No, wrong. May your sites live long and prosper. That was about it. I am usually known as Polyester. Apparently, I prefer chemical powders, and you should keep me away from fire. I'm known as Polyester on most social sites, so GitHub, Mastodon, Blue Sky. I don't publish on the Dead Bird anymore ever since Space Karen took over, but I keep the account so that nobody else gets it. But yeah, you should be able to find me. And I am available at emails, both at Plone and at Clean Clothes. And that's it. Questions?
Are there any questions? Well, then, thank you, everyone. Remember that the lightning talks are slightly less than 2 minutes away.
They'll run late as well. We'll be fine.
Yeah, don't worry. So please be there. Thank you, everyone.